Hello, Tansei and Ian. Good afternoon. Welcome to APTN InFocus. I'm Daryl Stranger. We have a very, very heartwarming episode of InFocus for you today. If you haven't already guessed, today's episode is all about love. And we, of course, would love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. We have already seen so many wonderful submissions, but we still want you to join in on our conversation. You can tweet us at APTN InFocus, or you can also email infocus@aptn.ca. And with that, let's just get right into it, shall we? Joining us now on InFocus are one of the cutest couples you'll ever meet, and they actually met in residential school. So Darcy and Jennifer Wood are here. Darcy, Jennifer, thank you so much for coming in. And as I just mentioned, you guys met in residential school, right? So can you maybe share a bit of the story there?
All right, yeah. We both went there at the school in 1973 and got there. And we didn't know each other. I'm originally from Garden Hill First Nation. That's how I got there, and I was the only one from that area to come to Portage La Prairie at that time. So,
yeah, and we met there, and we were friends first of all, and we had a group of friends that we stuck with during the duration at residential school. And we, you know, when you're at residential school, you become very close with everyone because you're by yourself and you don't have your family with you. So we connected with friendship first of all, and then soon, afterwards, when the residential school shut down, we both were in Winnipeg, and we literally bumped into each other in front of Colony Theatre.
Just a happenstance little incident there? Is it?
Yeah, well, I had graduated in '76 and left, and she continued to go to high school elsewhere. So I think there was a 2-year span there. We haven't seen each other, but like she said, literally, and we were still friends, and
right.
we still. So it was good to see her at that time, and we remained good friends for a few more. Couple of years anyway, and until we saw more of each other.
That's such a cool story, and the fact that you also bumped into each other after that too. I mean, it just then everything was working out so far, and it's worked out, which is always great to see. So, being in the relationship, and I thought I'd ask you guys, what's the secret, maybe, if there is one, to a loving relationship? If you have any secrets.
Yeah.
I think it basically is having respect for one another, and to value each other, and to have faith in one another. I mean, everyone knows that relationships aren't easy, and you're always going to have to make sacrifices for one another, and I think that's what we've done. And I believe that the basis of our success for our relationship is that we remained friends the day that we met. We always have that ongoing friendship and still laugh at one another's jokes, and we still, have those deep conversations that we did when we first met.
Right.
Yeah, on top of that is communication. And she's right, there's no perfect relationship. And the thing is, we keep working at it. Even to this day, we still work at it. Keep working on it and getting more and more insightful. We're beginning to kind of read our body language a bit better too, and know when to stay away, know when to have your alone time, because alone time is good too. So she does a little bit of meditating, so do I. So that kind of helps, just being yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you had mentioned how important it was that maybe you were friends before getting into a relationship. So how important truly was that you had known each other on a level where it was you could just be friends and not have to worry about that other romantic side of it too?
No, we were good friends, and we were with other people as well that we remained close with as a group, because we relied on one another with our other friendships. So we did many things together. We went on sports together and trips together, and the residential school is a place where you want to have close friendships that you can trust and have a confidant in, and that's what I became to love about him is that he was still my friend and still is my best friend today.
Mm-hmm. And people say never go to bed angry. Is that true for you guys?
Well, at the beginning, not so true. But you learn. That's one of the things that you learn. You
Right.
work on. That's one of the things you work on.
Mm.
Sometimes it's just that being apart is good as well.
Yeah.
So, so you got to let that happen. You got to let that grow as well,
Mm-hmm.
up until you get to that point where, yes, don't go to bed angry,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes you still have to, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's still like no relationship is perfect, but you find your medium spot
Right.
and something that we can live with. We
Mhm.
know it's okay to do that as
Yeah.
well at times.
Well, and I imagine that's where the communication comes into play too. Is if you do go to bed a little angry, but I imagine it's again just one of those things you guys work on all the time.
Yeah.
And Jennifer, what do you love most about being married to Darcy?
I love the fact that we've come a long way. We had our struggles, and we stuck together through our struggles. We, didn't start off in a most beautiful home, but we had our visions of what kind of life we wanted to have, and we wanted to own our own home, and we wanted to have children, and we have 2 beautiful daughters, and we have 11 grandchildren. So that's what I love about our relationship, is that it kept continuing to grow and to grow and to flourish into better and better things for us.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I love about it.
And Darcy, I'll ask you the same question, but what do you love being about married to Jennifer?
Well, I like her fire stick. She's always gung ho about doing something. Her excited about even the smallest things, and makes me realize how life is.
Right.
Life is beautiful, and when she gets excited about these things, I used to find them boring. But you look at your whole life, your life kind of joins together.
Right.
So when you start having that same spark together, same interest together, it becomes easier and easier as you go.
Mm-hmm.
So our love each other is built that way as well.
And sort of on that same subject, what does love look like to the two of you, and maybe what does love look like in your relationship, and how would you describe love?
I would describe love as being vulnerable and being able to be vulnerable with one another. Like if we're waiting for some news that we're waiting to happen that might not be the best of news, that I can be vulnerable and he can appreciate it, and that he's there for me, and he has faith in me, and I can count on that. So that's those are the things that come to mind for me personally, that we've always continued to grow and to you almost come to a deeper and deeper understanding of one another, and that's what I really appreciate in my husband.
Mm-hmm. And I'll ask you the same question again, Darcy. What does love look like in your relationship and to you?
With me, it's many things, but in particular, I like her strong will about being able to communicate. I wasn't a very good communicator when I started, and she taught me that to make it. It's easier if you communicate, being open, being more honest, and I'm a very secure person, and I'm secure in doing what I'm doing, and I feel very secure with our relationship. So I just don't have any of that jealousy portion of me. I really don't. That's how much I have that trust in her. So I don't. I'm very secure on that. So that's my love. I'm secure. I'm not.
Well, do you guys have any children?
We do.
How many children do you guys have?
We have 2 daughters, and we have 11 grandchildren.
Oh, wow.
And we spend a lot of time with our family. They all reside in the city of Winnipeg.
Okay.
And I'm very, very fortunate, because I know people have grandchildren that live out of province, but ours is here. And I always tease my fellow friends that we could have our own hockey team or our own baseball team, because there's so many of them. But they're all healthy, and they're all successful, and they're all growing into really fine young individual.
Yeah.
Well, it's lovely to hear, and it is nice having family so close, especially your close family. So with your children and your grandchildren, have you passed along any of what you've said here to them, and maybe tried to share your experiences with them?
We certainly have tried, but they have to grow on their own with their own partners. Like it's a different dynamics,
Right.
different situations, so they have to find ways of how they can be able to live together.
Mm-hmm.
But again, sometimes in relationships, sometimes it just can't work because, as Jennifer used to say, you got to be reciprocal to your partner.
Right.
And if one doesn't, and you keep trying, it may not happen at all.
Right.
And I know some of one of my daughters has started a relationship, and then had to end it. But the good part of that is that the father is still very much involved to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Attends family gatherings, and I make a joke that she doesn't like it. It says, "I got 2 daughters, but I got 3 sons-in-law." It's still one big family, so she learned something with that, and they
Right.
both learn how to live with that.
Well, with just going back to how you guys met, and maybe is it your shared experience of being in residential school together? Did that help the relationship? Like, if you weren't in your shared experience is what I'm getting at here, and being in the residential school together. Do you think that brought you guys closer together after the fact as well?
Most definitely. The fact that we were both at residential school, it really, because we came through a lot, and, our parents, I'm a 3rd generational residential school survivor. His mother went to the same residential school, which is very ironic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very significant to us that we both came through the residential school. It made us stronger. It, we have a history with so many memories there of good friendships and first experiences. So I believe that it has helped us a lot that we both came from the same residential school and we met there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think she mentioned before, all we had was each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once we had started being friends, that relationship, that bond started growing until, like I said, I think it was probably at least 3 or 4 years after '76. So it's in the '80s. I guess that'll be 1980. If we're going to put a time stamp on when we started being more boyfriend girlfriend at that time.
Right. Well, before we let you guys go, I know I've asked you what you love about each other and what your relationship means, but so we're talking about love, but maybe what do you guys love just outside of your relationship, and just love in general? I'll get you guys maybe 1 or 2 things that you guys just love either doing or seeing or anything like that.
I love going to the hockey games to watch our grandchildren, and I love walking outdoors. I like taking care of myself, and I love documentaries, and I love, when I see youth that are inspired and that they're trying new things. I have a really deep heart for the youth that I believe we have to help them and mentor them and guide them along the way. That's one of my passions that I have for myself personally.
And Darcy, do you want to end off on what you love too?
Well, again, I can safely say I must have been to every hockey rink in the city of Winnipeg, and wherever one is. and it's part of that is family. I know it's not outside of it's kind of outside our relationship, but it's still within there.
Right.
The family, I love our family gatherings. I love cooking for them, and it's just great. But outside of that, I love the work I'm doing right now too as well. And I know she's passionate about what she's been doing for years. So we have the same interest, and we share. She used to have a little event planning company, and I always helped her out there too. So we even in the professional life, we can work together if we needed to.
We do.
Well, I love this conversation. Unfortunately, I wish we had more time, but we'll have to leave it there, guys. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing a bit of your relationship and your story. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
And here's their story from last year from Tamara Pimentel.
This one on our jackets, right?
For Jennifer and Darcy Wood, their time at the Portage La Prairie Residential School in the early 70s led to friendships and experiences that pushed them out of their comfort zones.
I was involved with the sports in the school as well. I was part of the basketball team, even the football.
We made a lot of friends there. And that's where I met Darcy.
Little did they know their friendship would last a lifetime. Jennifer and Darcy married in 1992. The pair were both raised by residential school survivors. They didn't experience abuse during their time in the institution. They even went home for Christmas. But the couple says they now feel disconnected from their communities. Darcy is from Garden Hill in northern Manitoba.
Growing up, I remember a lot of times I was in the bush, and I loved that life. I missed it, but that was during the fur trade type of thing. That's how we survived. That way of life I stopped. That's when I was 7 because I had to go to school. My dad said, "You can't. The world is changing. You got to go to school."
I came to residential school from northern Manitoba, from Oxford House. My father brought me there. The school, they felt, was inadequate in Oxford House. So when we got to the school, I brought in my suitcases, and Dad was with me, and he told me, I guess I'll see you. And I didn't know he was going to leave.
Jennifer says leaving her father meant leaving his teachings on the land.
He was a very skilled hunter and fisherman, and as well he spoke the language fluently. And just being in an environment with a family, you're disconnected, and when you go back to the community, a lot of people will treat you different because you left the reserve and the community, and a lot of people think that you're either acting different or looking different and dressing different. So you always felt a slight disconnect in that way.
Jennifer and Darcy have broken a cycle many face due to intergenerational trauma. They have 11 grandchildren, enough to create their own sports team. Darcy runs 2 nonprofit organizations bringing renewable energy and healthy food to communities in northern Manitoba. And Jennifer works for the National Centre of Truth and Reconciliation, bringing a voice to survivors.
We were fortunate in our time at residential school that we didn't experience getting abused, because a lot of the survivors across Canada fell to being abused, like significantly. That is why a lot of our people are on the streets and are homeless, because they fell to the addictions and dealing with their pain. We don't have the resources in Canada to accommodate that need. And I believe that going forward, I hope that the government will step up and start recognizing what the survivors need and start putting some resources and funding towards that.
All right, we have to step away for a moment, but the love is just getting started. Stay with us.
Join our conversation now. Like us on Facebook on our APTN News page, follow or tweet us at APTN InFocus, and send your thoughts to infocus@aptn.ca.
Welcome back to APTN in Focus. Joining us now is Dot Bocage Kennedy from the Nipissing First Nation in Ontario. Dot, we are so pleased to welcome you to the show. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you for having me, Miigwech.
So I understand that you are a wedding officiant. Can you tell us about how you legally became an Indigenous officiant?
Okay, I started in 1991. The chief I had at the time wrote me a letter to support, my becoming a wedding officiant, as everybody that I knew was either going to City Hall or going to, at that time, was Justice of the Peace. And I thought, well, we should have our own wedding officiants, because we not only just do the paper, but we also, we encompass the ceremony that goes with it. And that's what makes it so beautiful. And then, you know, the government, of course, wants paper. We had a lot of our own people, like our Indigenous people, just getting married with the ceremony, but they never had the paper to say, yes, I'm legally married. So I pursued that since 1991, and I met with a few people. I would go to Toronto, I would write letters, I made photocopies. And then finally, I think 2 years now, we had a meeting here, and my chief, Scott McLeod, supported me to get a resolution to the Chiefs of Ontario to back us up in getting this the right to marry people like anybody, Indigenous or non-Indigenous. So we moved forward with that, and we finally got it approved. And now right on the marriage license, you will see clergy, minister, or elder, Indigenous elder, right on the paper.
That's amazing.
So when I saw that, I wanted to kiss the paper. I was so in awe because, you know, the government always wants us to have paper. Well, give us the right to have the paper to do the things that we need to do for our own people, because our ceremonies, our weddings are more than just, you know, a piece of paper. We have ceremony with it. You know, we have a song, we have a prayer, we have a smudge. And so that's why it was so important that we get that legal document, because without a legal document, two people getting married just in ceremony does not stand up in the law.
Right.
In courts, you know. So this way here now, they have their proper marriage license, and they have a legal document that they can, you know, keep and say, yes, we are married.
Well,
we have our...
Sorry, Dot. So what sets an Indigenous wedding ceremony apart? I know you'd mentioned things like smudge and prayer and all that, but what specifically sets an Indigenous wedding ceremony apart from the rest?
Okay, some of the rest, like I do all weddings, whether on the whole medicine wheel. You know, if you're a human, I'll marry you. So some of people just want like a simple wedding. They're elderly people. They just never got married. So they'll just have like a little simple wedding and no traditional or ceremony, Indigenous ceremony. So they just have that, which is what they want. And some of our people, you know, they want the whole ceremonies with the lighting of the fire and the dressing in the regalias and having all the elders, you know, come and do the pipe and talk to the couple that's getting married, you know, to let them know that this is a very serious thing that you're doing. And so there's different types. There's no two weddings the same, but in the end they get their license, and that's what they need.
So Dot, in your time you've been doing this, is there a ceremony that you've done that stood out to you, or maybe has it been maybe one on the land, or is there one that maybe stands out above the rest for you?
Well, actually, there is one that I did out on the land, and we had all the elders there, and everybody was dressed in their traditional regalias, and all the elders, were able to come, and they brought their pipes, and during the ceremonies, they were lighting their pipes, and the groom had to light his fire with a flint. So that was the first how we started. And once his flint was lit, then we can move on with the rest of the wedding that we had to do. And then it was really nice because at the supper table, they also sat all the elders at the supper table, and so in the evening, because there's no drugs and alcohol for traditional weddings, and so in the evening we had a giveaway, and we had like a little mini powwow. It was just beautiful. So now I think everybody should get married at a powwow. Just kidding.
Well,
would be a good idea.
Well, that sounds like it'd be an amazing time, especially it being on the land as well.
That's right.
Now, so you will marry anyone, right?
Yes.
So maybe what's the strangest combination of faiths that you can remember that you've married?
Well, most of the people I have married same sex, and I've married to just like I said, a lot of seniors, sometimes they wait for the last minute to get married. So I just have a little quick ceremony for them. And it's all different. It's hard to explain. It's what the people want. This is what I do. If they want a nice drum, you know, or a song and a smudge, and some people, like, we go out, we'll take a boat and go out to an island and have a ceremony of the wedding there. And we all gather, you know, at a lodge somewhere. It's really nice. So it varies. None of them are ever the same. I had one lady that came down the river in a canoe in her wedding dress with her dad. I thought that was great.
Wow.
It was different and nice.
So in doing this, like, what do you love about officiating weddings, Dot? Like, what is it about these that you just love doing?
Well,
so much?
I guess what I love about the weddings is the people. You know, I get attached to people, and I like to help them. Like, I usually end up, while the bride's getting ready, not allowed to see the groom. Well, I usually help the man settle down and calm down, and, you know, because they're nervous, and chit chat with them. And yeah, but I just love people. It's a happy occasion. Like yesterday, we had one in Bear Island. I went over on the ice road. They came and got me. We had the wedding in the band office. It was Valentine's Day. And it was really, like, very special.
Well, so how often are you doing this then? You just said you were at one yesterday, and now you're on our show here, which we appreciate. So how often are you out doing this?
As needed, whenever I'm called. If I'm not booked, I'll come. Yeah.
Okay.
I just said I don't do skydiving or scuba diving.
Well, there we go.
I'll do everything else.
There we go. So we got the stipulations for signing you up if people need an officiant. So in your, like, what does love look like? We're here talking about love. What does love look like in your eyes?
Well, you know, I can tell when I'm there with the couple that's making this commitment. I see it. And I can just tell that these people really, really are meant for each other. You know, you just see it because you see so many people, and you see that love there, and you see that, you know, like they're just so happy. There's no words to describe it. And it's nice to see that in these, and they're not always young people, it's different age groups.
Right. And before we let you go, Dot, we're asking about love. What are some of the things that you love? Like, it could be, is it you know, a person, your family, a pet maybe? What are some of the things you love, Dot?
Well, you know, I'm a powwow dancer.
Okay.
And I go to a lot of powwows. I go to Albuquerque. I've been there a couple of times. But I travel the powwow trail, and I love to hang out with my powwow brothers and sisters and travel all over to every community that I can go. And I usually I went to Chicago once, and I saw somebody I knew. I said, oh my God, I'm in Chicago, and here's a friend from Wikwemicon, you know? You just never know. Yeah.
Well, Dot, we certainly appreciate you coming on our show and sharing a bit of your story. And if anybody needs a wedding officiant, I'll be sure to send them your way. But we do really appreciate you coming on and sharing a bit of what you do and what you love, Dot. We really appreciate it.
And you know, other people can get their license for Ontario. You have to make like my license is now held by a Nipissing First Nation.
Okay.
And I do the weddings, and I'm accountable to them. If I do like don't show up for a wedding or something really awful happens, you know, I'm accountable for that. But any First Nation now in Ontario, whether it's a Friendship Center, a First Nation, a Métis Nation, any Indigenous organization that's wants to give that power to their people, they can. And I'm hoping that it'll just come, and a lot of people, you know, will come and do this for our people.
Okay, that's good to know, Dot. Thanks so much for this.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. Miigwech. Pamapi.
All right, it's time for one more quick pause. We'll have more love talk when we come back. Welcome back to APTN in Focus. Let's go to social media now with our social media editor, Jesse Andrushko, to hear what some of you are saying about today's topic. And Jesse, before we get into that, we're talking about love. What do you love?
Wow, what do I love? My wife, first of all, family, being in good health. What about you?
Well, I don't have a wife yet, so I would have said that, but family, friends, and doing this. I love doing this and my job, so it is really nice. What does our audience love?
Great question. Well, we've got a lot of good submissions online, so let's take a look. First, from Tina Bernard. She shared the story of how she met her partner, Leonard, on the East Coast. Growing up in and around Boston, Tina and her parents would travel up and down the coast to go blueberry picking along with many other Mi'kmaq. At the age of 16, Tina's family moved to Wagoagoa, Nova Scotia. One sunny spring morning, Leonard, who was 17 at the time, approached Tina and asked her to go to a local arcade. From that moment, they were inseparable. During the winter months, Leonard would walk through blizzards across the reserve just to see Tina. It was only later in the relationship that Leonard shared something interesting. Years before he asked Tina out, back when she lived around Boston, Leonard was out in the field when he saw a girl of his dreams picking blueberries with her family. Turns out that girl was Tina. Tina says it was God's roll of the dice that a young Micmac city kid would meet a res kid living worlds apart. Great story, Tina. Our next submission is from Stella Woodhouse. It's been almost a year since her love, Norman, passed away. Last February was the last time they were together on Valentine's Day, so the day is very precious to her now. They spent the day in the hospital as Norman was recovering from heart surgery. They had a delicious supper with their children, and she was happy that she got to spend just a little bit longer with her love before his passing. Very touching, Stella. Next, we have a submission from Pennell Smith. Their heart is with their cat, Tureen. Pennell says they spend every Valentine's Day together. Very nice. Lastly, we have a submission from Melissa Wynn, who wanted to share someone who is super important in her life. Her grandpa, John Jack, from James Bay Lowlands in Ontario. He was an Indigenous veteran who fought in World War II. Melissa says he was a very honest and humble man. Great stuff. Thank you. Those are really touching stories. If you want to share your story, here's how. Send an email to infocus@aptn.ca, like us on Facebook on our APTN News page, or follow and tweet us at APTN InFocus.
Well, those are just a few of the many, many stories we got from you guys, so thank you so much. Our next guests here today are Amber Dion and Terry Cardinal. They are the hosts of Two Crees in a Pod from Treaty 6 territory. A lot of what they talk about is honoring Indigenous practices and, of course, love. I spoke with them last week. Amber, Terry, thank you both so much for joining us. This is such a fun episode for us to do. To start off here, why don't you guys just tell us a little bit about who you each are and your podcast as well.
I'll go first. Tanse, ay bigasis ni Tigasun, Tinakomasik Otsinia. My name is Amber Dion, and I'm from the Kihiwin Cree Nation here in Treaty 6 territory. And I'm an assistant professor with MacEwan University School of Social Work. I'm a parent. I'm a lot of things. I'm a lover. and I'll allow my co-host here to introduce herself. My name is Terry Cardinal. I'm from Sally Cree Nation in Treaty 6 territory. I am the co-creator, co-producer of Two Crees in a Pod with Amber. I am currently the Director of Indigenous Initiatives with MacEwan University. I'm a PhD student in social work, and I'm also working in my home community with the Indian Residential School Project. And I'm a mom.
Well, the mom, I think, is one of the most important things that you just listed there. So, Two Crees in a Pod, I mean, a great name, first of all. Can you share a little bit of like, the story of the podcast?
For sure. It was one of my bright ideas. And it was about 1 o'clock in the morning on a weekday. I couldn't sleep. And I had messaged my best friend here, Terry, at that time. And I said, hey, do you want to start a podcast? And she, I don't know why she agreed, but she did. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, so maybe we were both a little tired. But the reason why we started the podcast in the first place was to ensure that there was some auditory resources specifically for social work students at that time. And we wanted to ensure that that our stories were being told by us. As you know, our stories get told with or without us. And so we wanted to ensure that we were the ones holding the space and inviting other people in to share our stories. At that time, it was more directed towards social work education, and it has morphed and grown so much since then. And we now talk to all kinds of folks about all kinds of things Indigenous. And so the name Two Crees in a Pod, again, her and I were talking about what we would name it, and then we came up with Two Crees in a Pod.
I still think that's one of the better names out there for a podcast, so you guys did well there. And one of the things that you guys talk about quite a bit, and you space it out, but you do talk about it, is Indigenous love, and you bring it up on your podcast. I just wanted to ask about that, and maybe what you guys have learned talking about it, talking to different people about Indigenous love, and what you've learned, and maybe try to pass on to each other as well.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting because when we did our first podcast with our auntie, Dr. Leona McCocus, the conversation in that first podcast talked about love. And then when we were done that season, the last interview that we did, they also talked about love. And so, Amber and I have had these conversations and how love really encompasses a lot of things, whether that be our intimate partner relationships, whether that be our relationships with our friends, our family, our relationships with ceremony, our relationships with the land, and so really how that comes to be. And I was just telling Amber, as I even dive into my research, and I'm really understanding and researching many different areas around research on the land, for instance, is understanding our relationship and our love for the land. And I was once asked, do you love the land? And I'm like, yeah, I love the land. But why do you love the land? What is it that you love about the land? And I had to really think about that in that relationship that I have to the land. And I think that, part of this, when we've done this work, love is always very present in our podcasts. And I think that, we had the session that we did with Amber, and that was actually a session on Indigenous love, which we did, I think, in 2020 or 2021. And that was done in a parking lot in her vehicle, where it was a spur of a moment kind of podcast where she called and she's like, I need to talk and we need to record this. And I was like, all right. So she picked me up and we got into the car, found a parking lot, grabbed some tea, sat in there and did this podcast on Indigenous love. And really part of that was just, I think, Amber and I just processing some of the challenges that we've experienced in our relationships as Indigenous women. Because it looks differently. Even when we think about learning about love or learning about different attachment styles within our own life, we learn about them in the Western perspective, but how we experience them as Indigenous people is very different. It is very different. And so we're always having these interesting conversations.
Well, yeah. Amber, did you want to add on to that?
I think the only thing, Terry did a really great job of describing, all of those things. I think that I remember one of the first times I wrote about love, and we'll do a shameless plug here as well, that there's also a meditation album that was released that we are launching on February 14th. And the album is called Kisagitin, which means love in the Cree language. And I remember many years ago, it was probably about 11 years ago, that I had my very first experience with writing about love. And it was in relation to my dad. And I remember sitting in my office. I was teaching at a different institution at that time. And I had to ask myself, how do I know I was loved? And because the language of love wasn't used in my home. And it's not because my parents didn't love us and they don't love us. It's because they didn't have the language of love. They couldn't say, I love you. And so I started writing about it way back then. And I had to start asking myself, how did I know I was loved, by an Indian residential school survivor? How did I know I was loved? And so I started to write down all the ways that I knew, all the indicators of Indigenous love. Mm-hmm. And so recently, Terry and her team were involved in developing this meditation album. It's a second volume, actually. And I wrote out this piece. My dad passed away in May, almost 2 years ago. And I wrote this piece for my dad. And it was about ensuring that my dad knew that I knew he loved me. And so I wrote it out, and Terry spoke it onto the album, and her dad responded. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful piece. It's track number 3 on that album. And it's a beautiful piece that's dedicated to our fathers, and who are both Indian residential school survivors. And so this discussion of love for me began, with understanding what that means from a father-daughter relationship, and then eventually turned into a lot of other things for me about understanding intimate partner relationships, specifically Indigenous intimate partner relationships.
Well, what you both said is just so heartwarming and so refreshing to hear, in a sense. And I know it's one of the things that you both had talked about. Again, I've listened to your podcast. It's great. I did listen to the car episode in the parking lot, and I thought that was one of the best episodes. But one of the things that the two of you talk about is being there for each other and giving each other love, both and encouraging good ways, but also the tough love, I think, is also just as important. Would you guys agree with that? And then maybe why tough love is also important in any relationship you have?
The way that her and I smarten each other up, we definitely smarten one another up, and it is that, and Terry talked earlier about ceremony. And, one of the things that I've learned in my life, in both being in ceremony and also witnessing other people in ceremony, is we're sometimes, a lot of the time, we're given very direct, I don't know, maybe it's a bit strict sometimes, or maybe folks, feel like it's strict, but we're told how to behave, in those spaces. And Terry and I do that with one another. We remind each other of both our gifts and all the ways that we are good in this world. And then we have to smarten one another up sometimes, much like we would get it from a grandmother, a grandmother saying, hey, that's enough, smarten up, And so I think that that's one of the ways that we show love to one another, for sure.
And I'll add to that, because I think that this speaks to the importance of having those type of solid relationships in our lives, the importance of how that actually creates a lot of balance within ourselves, but also those healthy relationships. When we have the supports in place that could help us through trauma or through losses, because, we're all human beings and we're all going to experience trauma, and we're all going to experience losses, especially as we get older. And I think that when we have that healthy connection or relationship with somebody close in our lives, and they are able to be in that space and love us when we experience trauma and loss, that helps us move through trauma and loss. When it's unresolved, it's when we've experienced a trauma or a loss where we haven't had that, or our partner hasn't given us that. And so, working through that, and I think that, Amber and I have known each other a very long time. And I've gone through some stuff as well as she has. And we've always been there to support each other, to assist one another, and to hold space for one another, and loving space for one another.
Well, so many people have so many different paths, but at the same time, it seems like we all have a lot of similar stories. And to hear some of what you're saying, I'm sure many, many people can also relate to that, which is so heartwarming to hear. And obviously, we're here talking about love, and we can't let you go without asking the two of you some of your favorite things and what you guys love. What do you guys love?
That's a big question. There's the obvious, the relationships that we have in our lives, our children, our families, our sisterhoods that we have, and I think that part of that has to do with how do we and Terry and I have talked about this on, you know, some informal conversations, but also on our podcast about expressing how we experience one another, and that how we experience one another is through love, and how we share that throughout the world. So I think about what I love myself, you know, at first and foremost, and that's something I've learned a lot of over the last year and a half, is about how to love myself, and how to share that love and be that light that some folks might need a little bit more of. They can't take too much, though. They can't take too much of the light. But really, I mean, I think about how there's the obvious things, but there's also that importance about how do we love ourselves? What are the things that we're saying to ourselves? And that's something I've had a big learning about.
And Terry, what do you love?
Yeah, and you know, adding to that, of course, you know, our relationships that we have in our life, our children, our families, our community. I think that, you know, the immediate thought, and I think about gratitude right away, and in that same sense, the love that I have with Creator, and the love that I have to that spiritual connection that to, you know, my grandmothers and my grandfathers. I think that that's one of the strongest, when I think and I have my meditations, or, you know, I'm smudging in the morning, I am showing that gratitude, but there's almost like this gratitude of like, oh, thank you for loving me, and thank you for protecting me, and thank you for taking care of me, not just me, but my family. And that reciprocal understanding of that love for the spiritual world. I think that that's definitely something that we sometimes forget. And it's such a powerful way to be in relation and to start your day.
And I think that the important piece of that what Terry just said is that you are love. I am love. You are love. We are all love. And that's our first teaching. You know, that is our very first teaching in many Indigenous cultures globally. The first teaching is always love. And so, you know, we are born into this world to experience it, and we are born into this world to offer it to others as well. And so, you know, I love you. Here you go. Here you go. Here's the love.
I think that's such a great reminder, because some people can tend to forget that, especially in some of the harder times. So I'm really glad you guys said that. That's really such an important thing to remember. And I wish we had more time, guys. We could talk about this for so long. Maybe we'll have to make a whole podcast episode about this. But thank you guys so much for coming on InFocus. We really enjoyed this, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, here's a fun story about Winnipeg's Bear Clan and two wonderful people who met while on patrol. APTN's Leanne Sanders had their story for Valentine's Day yesterday.
After meeting briefly in 2020, it would be months before activists Melissa Normand and George Robinson saw each other again, their shifts walking with Bear Clan patrol never quite matching up. Until George put out a call for walkers on a Bear Clan Facebook page on July 31st, 2021, and Melissa answered.
Two gentlemen from Fort McMurray that were doing a walkthrough for our 215 going to Ottawa, and I was like, who is this guy? What is he doing on our page? You know, because I've been a regular member for many years and know of everyone, and didn't recognize his name, and pulled it up and went, oh, it's him.
But Melissa was cautious.
I actually offered her a ride, and I kind of creeped her out, I guess.
I shut him down. I was like, I don't ride with strangers.
The pair took time getting to know one another. Melissa was busy with her animal rescue and Bear Clan, George working up north. But as fate would have it, they ended up falling in love.
September 18th, I asked her to marry me, and we're married by February 11th.
Yeah, less than 17 months.
They're so busy with Camp Morgan at the Brady Road landfill, named for Melissa's cousin Morgan Harris, with the rescue and with Bear Clan. Melissa and George don't know when they'll have time for a honeymoon, but they're going on a special Valentine's date tonight to add ink to their matching tattoos. Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Well, that's such a wonderful story, and unfortunately that is all the time we have for today's In Focus. Now, today's episode will be available as a podcast. You can listen and subscribe on aptnnews.ca/podcasts, or you can find us on your favorite player. And if you missed any of our past episodes and you want to catch up, or you want to rewatch this episode, you can find them and more on aptnnews.ca/infocus. Again, a big thank you, Miigwech, to all of our guests for joining us today and sharing their stories. And thank you as well for watching and sharing your stories of love. We certainly appreciated them. I'm Daryl Stranger. Have yourselves a wonderful evening and a loving afternoon.